Good evening, everyone, and welcome to A&K Together Live, a live conversation that's part of A&K Together, our new series of inspiring stories from A&K experts around the world. We're excited to be here with you for How I Got the Shot with photographer, author, and A&K photo enrichment coach, Rick Sammon. In just a few moments, Rick will be talking with us about one of his favorite images, as well as share some tips for taking better photos. He'll also be joined by Bob Simpson, A&K's Vice President of Expedition Cruising. My name is Jordan, and I'll be your host this evening. Before we begin, I have a few quick notes about questions. Feel free to type your questions into the presentation using the control pane located on the right-hand side of your screen. To submit the question, like I said, just type it into the question pane, and then I will be able to see the questions and read them back to Bob and Rick at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, I'm excited to introduce Rick Sammon and Bob Simpson.
Thank you very much, Jordan. And first and foremost, I want to thank all of our friends, our guests, our travel advisors from all over. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And as I mentioned, in some cases, good morning, because I know we got a number of our friends in Australia joining us. It's Thursday morning over there. But first and foremost, from all of us at A&K, I would like to express our thanks for you taking time to join us today, and we wish you all the health and safety that this time requires for all of us. I know it's probably for the first time ever we're all sidelined, and I know that you're all very anxious to just get out there and experience and enjoy and do the things that you want to do. I know for myself and my team, and I know I can speak for Rick as well, we're all very, very eager to get out there as well in the coming months. When you're ready, I guarantee you we'll be ready. So we'll be ready to welcome you. For me, travel, and I think in particular expedition cruising, it's really all about touching all of our senses, our sense of sight, our sense of smell, what we hear, the things that we can visualize and touch, and actually how it feels right inside, with our experiences. There's no better way, though, to tell the great stories that we have the gift of being able to tell after our travel experiences than with great photos. And there's really no better great photographic storyteller than my good friend Rick Sammon. To bring Rick in right now, and he's going to explain to us how he gets the shots. Rick,
well, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Well, thank you, my friend Bob. You guys can see my screen here.
I got it.
Okay, great. So anyway, it's an honor. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be one of the photo enrichment coaches on the A&K trips. I'm just part of the team there. I love the geologists, the climate experts, the chefs are great too. But it's really, I learned so much. So I hope you guys learned a lot from this presentation. So anyway, this is called How I Got the Shot. We were on the ship last January, L'Oreal, and I had to give a presentation at the last minute. So the team leader, Susanna, called me up in my room. She said, "Can you give a nice presentation in about an hour?" I said, "Sure." So I put this together, How I Got the Shot. And this is one of my favorite shots from South Georgia. Bob has been there. Bob mentioned that, all the different senses, including the sense of smell. So this may look beautiful, and it really doesn't smell that bad, but there is a lot of penguin guano up there. And these are king penguins, not to be confused with the emperor penguins. So How I Got the Shot could be one title. Could also be called Snapshot to Great Shot, because as you'll see, it's not really that hard to turn a snapshot into a great shot. But most important is this. It's why I got the shot. And if you out there listening and watching, this is the question that we should really ask ourselves. Why are we taking the picture? And Bob mentioned all these senses. So I took this picture. Here's why I took this shot, is because I wanted to capture the awesomeness of being on South Georgia Island with these, right now you're looking at tens of thousands of penguins. But I have what I call my one picture promise. And that one picture promise is this, that if you're in a situation and if you could only take one picture and set a goal to take one picture, what would that be? I promise you that you get a higher percentage of good pictures. So anyway, when I left New York, this is the type of shot I wanted to get: penguins in the foreground, and all the penguins in the background, and the mountain in the background. So here's a shot, but here's the shot before I took that shot. It's unprocessed. It's a little lopsided. I'm running along with my mirrorless camera, following the rules. You can't get closer than 15 feet to the animals. So it's really a lopsided shot. So I took 17 pictures, again, following my one picture promise. I'm not like shooting all over the place. I wanted to get that one shot. So I'm concentrating on how can I get that shot. So here's the image right here. It's tilted. It doesn't have a lot of contrast. Looks a little flat, and it could use a little bit of cropping. So by just spending about maybe 5 minutes in Photoshop, and I use Photoshop more than Lightroom, and I teach that on the ship, Lightroom and Photoshop, as well as photography in the field. This is the final image. And when you're photographing wildlife, gesture is so important. And it's the gesture of the penguin on the right leaning into the frame. It's the gesture of the penguin's foot in the foreground that adds motion to it. Also, when you're photographing, dead center is deadly. So when you place a subject off center, your eye goes around the frame to see what else is in the frame. So that's my first tip. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, Rick, I just have a real quick question. I know there's a lot of techniques that you go over with the guests when you're on board in your sessions and during sessions. Does this require any specific special equipment as well, or just in terms of the strategy of how you're trying to get these photos?
Well, I'm using a mirrorless camera, and I'm holding it low to the ground with the flip out screen. So, this is a good tip. Have a camera. The tip is use your camera like a spaceship. Don't, just if you'll see coming up, I have some pictures looking straight down, and they look like snapshots. So one way to turn a snapshot into a great shot is to use your camera like a spaceship. I'm also photographing at a small aperture, so I get a lot of depth of field, and I'm using a wide angle lens. And I go over all this stuff when I'm shooting. So anyway, separation is important. Notice how these penguins are separated. I got down low. But another thing is we see the world in 3 dimensions, and our cameras see in 2. So we want to compose in layers. So we have the layers of the penguin and the penguins in the foreground. We have the penguins standing off to the left, and we have the penguins on the hill, and we have the mountain in the back. So when I'm composing in layers. So we have all these different layers. And the mountain, by the way, also balances the picture, and balance is really important. So here's what I was talking about, Bob, and to all the guests listening. And again, thank you so much for tuning in. A&K is the best Zodiac drivers out there. So right behind me, I'm just about to get on the Zodiac. And all these penguins, again, you can't get closer than 15 feet. And I follow those rules all the time, but that doesn't mean the penguins can't get close to you. So I'm just about to get on the Zodiac. I see these penguins coming toward me. So I got down low again, and look at the difference. Snapshot to, I don't want to say it's a great shot because I don't get blood. It's a much more creative shot. So using your camera like a spaceship, we have this separation again. And, thinking about the idea and the mood and the feeling, these penguins are majestic. So I wanted to capture that majestic feeling. So this is another reason why I got down low. Also, mood is so important. The overcast sky, as Bob knows, you see a lot of overcast skies in Antarctica, added to the mood and the feeling. Once again, I set a goal to take that shot, and I got the shot. So setting a goal is important. Another thing is I'm big on cropping. I have OCD, obsessive cropping disorder. But look what happens. Here's a shot. If I just crop it just a little bit, it seems like I'm much closer to the penguins. So I encourage the guests on the ship to crop. So those are pretty tight shots. Here's a shot of this rookery. But we have layers here too. We have a layer of like dirt and rocks in the foreground. We have a little bit of pond water next to that. Then we have the penguins standing in the pond and leading up to the mountain. So all these layers lead our eye into the frame. So again, we want to think about the mood and the feeling that we want to create.
Rick,
Bob,
can you go back? Could you go back to that one?
Yep.
Thank you so much. So, again, to me, it's all about telling these stories and touching the senses. And when I see this picture, and for me, having been places before, as I have at St. Andrews Bay, I close my eyes and all of my senses kind of come back and in different ways. And my wife Laura, she's very, senses of smell are very
right.
strong for her, and we'll be walking somewhere and she'll smell and it'll bring her back to her grandmother's kitchen in Birmingham when she was a young child. When I see this, I hear, like, it's not just, we talked about the smell, which we won't go into with great detail, but we got the guano and the number of penguins, but it's the sound, right? I close my eye, I hear that thunder. And as far as you can see, and you know this, all you see are these magical king penguins. When you take a picture like this, are you trying to capture all of those elements, or do you get the picture and you go, wow, that captured what I wanted?
Well, I've been doing this. It's a great question. I've been doing this a long time, so I'm sure a million things go through my mind. It's kind of like riding a bicycle. You don't really think about, how to make a left or a right-hand turn. You just do it. You can see everything in this scene is in focus here. And that's because I use, by the way, technically, a small aperture. But I am trying to, when I take a picture, I want to share, with my family and with the ANK guests and with people and my followers on Instagram and wherever. So I'm trying to capture a picture that tells a story. Like, this picture doesn't need a caption. It says it all. And, I actually getting a little sad. I'm serious looking at it because it was such a great experience. So I can't wait to get back. So anyway, these are all, this is a wide angle shot, but I also take portraits. This is taken with the telephoto lens at a wide aperture, so the background is blurred. Nice enough shot. But when it comes to photographing the animals, again, it's gesture. Gesture is very important. Nice enough shot, right? But look, this shows the penguin preening itself. So I go for a gesture. Same thing here. I'm walking along the beach. These guys are like walking right toward me, and I'm going for that gesture. I'm going for the separation. This is another thing I suggest to the guests on the ship. And I'm always available, as the guests know, in the lounge, on the deck, on shore, whatever. Go for an image with impact. So this picture is nice. It tells a story, and it has impact, but not as much impact as this. You see how packed these penguins are together. And there's something coming up about this picture. I'm going to give you a little bit of time to look around, but there's something really cool about this picture. And the idea is that we have to look around the entire frame to see what's going on. So this picture does have impact. And I also, getting back to my OCD, I always think about how can I crop a picture. This may not look good on Instagram. This one will. This is the same scene, but it's basically what I call a compositional mess. It doesn't have the impact that the other pictures had. So here's what I want to show you. Over here in this circle, there's this one penguin, sitting on this egg here. So this is what I do. We have to look around the frame to see what we want in and what we want out. Photography is subtractive. Painting is additive. Painters add to the scene. We have to say, what do we want to take out? So then here's a close-up of this. And we were there at the right time of year, and this is the ornithologists, the bird experts on the ship are just amazing. I probably wouldn't have gotten some of these shots if I didn't know about learning about all these the animals. Okay, so I want to share some landscape pictures. These are called lenticular clouds. This is taken from my room. It was just so beautiful, taken from the balcony of my room. It was just a scene that, I've never seen a scene like this before. And here's the key. When you see a scene like this, order room service and stay in your room. Don't go to the restaurant and eat. So this is a club sandwich. I think my wife would back me up in this. One day, I think I had 3 of these club sandwiches that were so good. I think my total for the trip was about 14. It's my favorite thing. But seriously, you can get great shots like this from the balcony. Richard Harkin, my friend, was also teaching there. He loves to shoot from the room, from the upper decks and the lower decks. So the tip here is this: light illuminates, shadows define. Shadows add a sense of depth and dimension to the picture. But again, look at this. This is the kind of shot you can get from the ship. My wife wanted me to take this type of picture. Speaking of setting goals, she said she wants to get the picture of the penguin, running out of the water. So I sat, I waited, and I finally got the shot. And what does your shot have in common with some of my other shots? That's right, gesture. And I like the gesture even of the water there. So here's my one picture promise. That again, if you set a goal to get a picture, I promise you that if you set that goal and say, I'm only going to get this picture, I can only use this lens, use this setting, whatever, I promise you, you'll get a higher percentage of good pictures. For example, for me, this picture is a compositional mess. It shows the penguins on the nest, but they're not really doing much. So I'm looking around and I found isolated this mommy and this chick. So for an hour, there was one other guest who stood with me. Everyone else is exploring the island and trying to get the shot. Here's the shot that I got, and cropping again is probably one of my top 3 favorite trips, photos from the trip. I just love the interaction. I love that's right, gesture. And here's another example of gesture over there on the left. I think we're coming down the home stretch here. Just gonna go through a couple of other pictures. Again, placing this main subject off center is important, and watching the background. You want a clean background to isolate the subjects. Let me tell you, Antarctica is just one of the most spectacularly beautiful places on the planet. Taken from my room again. It's just spectacular. But this picture doesn't have a foreground element. When you include a foreground element, this is taken from my cabin also, with a 24 to 105 millimeter lens, set at the 24 millimeter setting. Having that foreground element there makes you feel like you're there. Here, it's nice enough, right? But here, you feel like you're there. So try to include a foreground element. And if there's not a lot of different colors in the scene, look at this. Talking about images with impact, I think the black and white here is a lot more impactful than the color shot. The ice formations, when you go on an A&K trip, I say, I'm going to end with these because I know we're running out of time. I say, you snooze, you lose, or you can sleep when you're dead. You always have to be.
Love that one.
I'm going to have a T-shirt made. You can sleep when you're dead. But anyway, the picture opportunities are amazing. So I just have one more minute if I can, Bob. You think that's good?
You're doing great, Rick. Keep going. We love it.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Okay, I mentioned that the Zodiac drivers on the A&K ship, they're not just Zodiac drivers, they're Zodiac drivers / naturalists / bird experts / geologists / everything else / really fun, really fun people. So they work so hard for the guests. Not only professional photographers like me, because I'm just in the Zodiac with I don't know, 8 other people or so. They work so hard to get you into the right position to get the shot. So we see these penguins on this piece of blue ice, and the blue ice is just, as Bob knows, and those of you who have been on the A&K ships know, it's just so beautiful. So slowly with the engine, running very quietly. Then they turn it off. They maneuver us into position so you can get a shot like this. And it looks like this was very early in the morning. It looks like these penguins are having an early morning argument. But look at the difference, cropping makes. These were taken with a 24 to 105 millimeter image stabilization lens. Zoomed into the 24 millimeter setting. I like the way they're arguing, but notice how all the heads are separated. And I cropped this picture for Instagram. So
I love that sequence. Yeah, Rick, I love that sequence that you have there. And
well, it shows that that the Zodiac drivers are working with us. Then this blue ice. Bob, have you ever seen ice like this?
No, and it's you and I talked about this a lot. And the one thing I know that this is something that you particularly love. It's the color. It's the color. And particularly the colors of the ice. And so for you, when you see your own photos even, like, do you almost feel like when you're taking the photo, do you, in your mind's eye, are the photos capturing what we really see or what our guests really see when we're there?
Well, they do, and everyone in the ship, today with digital photography and little skill in Photoshop and Lightroom, you get professional photography results. Like you could take this picture with an iPhone, you could take this picture with an iPhone, but there's a difference between this picture and this picture. This doesn't have too many foreground elements, but notice the pieces of ice in the back. Looks like two eyes over there. There's the same piece of ice in the back with the eyes, but it looks like there's a necklace of ice around here. So what I do and what the other photo pros do, and A&K works with the best, and that's for sure, they get us into the right position. So I said, you know what, if we just wait a little while, wait for the ice to move, we'll be able to get some good shots. So anyway, that's a quick look at not only how I got the shot, why I got the shot, and this is kind of cool. I've written 40 books, and this is my one of my most recent books is called Phototherapy, A Motivation and Wisdom. And I know, Bob, we were talking about how wonderful photography is. It's also very, very therapeutic. So I'm going to escape here, and I can go to stop sharing my screen. Did I do that correctly?
Yeah, it's you and I. There we go. Rick, I was gonna, one last comment for me, and Jordan maybe has some questions, and we can do a bit more chatting. But that sequence that you had of those Gen 2 penguins on the ice.
Yeah.
What's remarkable to me is what you're capturing there also is very specific personality. You can see the interaction and almost the personality of these animals that is a very real aspect of what our guests experience is this unbelievable interaction with nature that way. And the photos capture that so well.
Well, thank you very much. But again, we go out in the morning, we go out at the right time, and no matter what animal you're photographing, whether it's an owl in your backyard, which I was doing the other day, understanding animal behavior and understanding how the ice moves and understanding all this. I think, how many lectures are there a day on the ship, Bob? 4 or 5?
It varies. It depends on how busy we are, each day with being on shore. But it's not just that, Rick, too. It's the constant interaction that I know that you and the team have with the guests, and so it's a constant learning experience from beginning to end, right?
I learned so much. I mentioned before Dr. Jason Hicks, one of the geologists there, and I just can't believe how much I learned from him. What was the woman's name, the bird expert on the last trip?
Patricia.
Oh my gosh, she was so popular. But because and the other thing is, I think, or I hope the viewers can see my passion for this and my passion for work with you guys. And I think all the A&K experts have this passion. The chefs have the passion too. Like,
absolutely.
Right? So anyway, it's a ton of fun. So I can't wait till all this is over and we get back to this is called A&K Together Live. I can't wait. Can't wait to be there.
We're really together live. Absolutely.
Thank you, gentlemen. That was great. We have a lot of questions that we want to get to, so I just want to remind our audience that if you haven't submitted a question, feel free to do so now, and we'll do our best to kind of get to them through this next Q&A session. So I'm going to start off with our first question, Rick. The first one is, which mirrorless camera and lens did you use?
Yeah, I've been to Antarctica twice with A&K, and both times I took the Canon EOS R mirrorless camera, and well, you can see it's just amazingly sharp. It's lighter, but the main reason that all my friends and a lot of my friends have switched to mirrorless cameras is the viewfinder. Everything you want to see is in the viewfinder or on the flip out screen, what's called a histogram, which tells you about the exposure and all this other stuff. So yeah, I've gone totally mirrorless, and I sold all my digital SLRs. I'm totally mirrorless.
Awesome. So our second question is, referring to the first shots of the penguins, what were your camera settings for that shot?
Right. Okay. So I'm using a 24 to 105 millimeter lens. They're talking about the one that's on the banner, I guess, right, with the three penguins.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, the 24 to 105. I'm shooting at the 24 millimeter setting because 24, the wider the lens, the more depth of field you have. I'm shooting at f16. Again, the smaller the number, the wider the depth of field. So it's a wide angle lens, a small aperture. And because it's overcast, I was shooting at about ISO 400.
Okay. So this is the third question. What does that mean when you use your camera as a spaceship?
Right.
And
That's
then
a great
second,
right.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, you use your camera like a spaceship. In other words, for that first shot, I'm getting down low, like the spaceship hasn't taken off, right? If photographing a person, I want to put the camera at eye level. When you put the camera at eye level, you moving the spaceship up. You see eye to eye. In other words, if I stand up and I'm looking down like this, you know, if I go like this, you're not really relating to me as much. So if you shoot at eye level, like I'm doing, have my camera here set up, and the penguins I'm shooting at eye level. So in other words, moving your camera up and down. Also, and like fashion photography, you see the models tilt their camera to the left or the right. This is called disequilibrium. So a lot of people, they set the camera up on a tripod and they just leave it there. Move it up and down. I guess, Bob, I should update it. Use your camera like a drone.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a great tip. I'm going to definitely have to implement it with my photos that I take.
Okay, well, you'll see a difference. Your photos will take off.
Perfect.
Sorry, Bob.
Bob, this question's for you. Is camera equipment available to rent on the ship? And is there a specialist on every trip to help with photography?
Yeah. So we do not have equipment that we have for rent or immediate use. We do provide for all the guests a very detailed sort of in our packing list, a very detailed list of recommended photography equipment based on the appropriateness of the program. And yes, to answer the last question, we do have a photo coach on every single voyage. So we have somebody there that's able to kind of A to Z from 101 to advanced photo techniques, everything in between that, so no matter what the guest sort of photo aptitude is in terms of their background, it's applicable for anyone. So anyone with different levels of skills for photography, are going to do just fine.
And I might add, by the way, all my pictures are taken again with the Canon mirrorless camera. There are some of those iceberg pictures that you could get with an iPhone.
Right.
Right? And actually, people were there with iPad shooting too.
And that's something you raise quite often, that good iPhone photography is good iPhone photography. So
right, like there's a lot of shots in my presentation you couldn't get with the iPhone, but there are some. But those people aren't as serious as I am. I'm pretty serious. I come across as maybe an easygoing guy, but deep down inside I'm very serious.
Don't get in Rick's way when he's going after the shot.
That's not true. You ask anyone. I'm always in the back. The people have taken my workshops.
The next question we have is referring to the image of 100 of penguins in the rookery. What telephoto lens do you like to use in that case?
Right. So
it's not hundreds.
It's thousands.
100,000.
Tens of thousands. How many on the island? Millions, right, Bob?
What's that?
How many there's millions on the island.
Oh, absolutely. That rookery there, there's easily tens of thousands, if not 100,000 or more king
penguins. I think it's 60,000 breeding pairs.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I don't take a lot of gear. There were some people on a trip with a backpack with like, I don't know, 7 or 8 lenses. I took 2 lenses, a 24 to 105 and a 70 to 200. Now, some people might say, why are you using a 70 to 200, not a 100 to 400? The animals, they come pretty close to you. They're very curious. So, you know, if you only had to take two, maybe it's 24 to 105 and 100 to 400, but you're going to get some great shots with a 70 to 200. And shoot at a wide aperture so you could blur the background. But that's a tip. Don't take a lot of gear, because when we went here, they suggested that we don't put the backpacks down on the ground, right, Bob? You know, this is one thing that I really respect about A&K. They follow these IOTA guidelines, which Bob could, you know, go into. But they're, you know, you vacuum your backpacks and you do all this other stuff and you scrub your boots and all this other stuff. But so if you have like all these lenses and you can't put your backpack down to get them, it's a problem. A&K actually supplied on this one anyway, really cool backpacks for our camera gear, which made it easy to get.
Yes, the gear is amazing. So the next question I have is, what level of resolutions do you typically shoot with?
Okay, well, I always shoot raw files, so the resolution depends on the camera. So I forget what the EOS R is, but I've made, I don't know if you can see in the back, I make, well, those are just 22-inch prints, but I've made a 40-inch, I have a 40-inch print here from the EOS R. But here's a tip on that note. Always shoot, actually, the person who answered that question probably knows a lot about photography. I always shoot at the lowest ISO to get the cleanest shot, the lowest possible ISO. Now, the lowest possible ISO on a very overcast day might be 400. But if you just shoot on automatic, auto ISO, the camera might pick a higher ISO, so you can't crop in and make a bigger enlargement. So the tip is shoot raw files. All the cameras today shoot raw files, and even the iPhone can shoot raw files through Lightroom and shoot at a low ISO.
And I should point out real quick too, Rick, when you're on site, when you're on shore, when the guests are on shore, you're there with them as well. And so a lot of this is real-time sort of guidance and tips and you know, guidance that that's very practical for them to use depending on what the conditions are. And as you know, the conditions change so rapidly. From the time that we drop anchor until the guests are on shore, things could have changed. So it's great that, you know, you and the rest of the team, but you're there to help them out and give guidance and tips along the way as well.
I always say, ask me. Actually, I wore a red vest on this. I wore red sneakers and I wore a red hat. And I say, wherever I am, because I want to be easy to spot, I said, if I'm walking around, just look for the guy with the red hat. No question, I always say, no question is too basic. No question is too simple, because my goal, and actually I had a private session today. I was given one of the guests from the trip who went on a 6-month around the world trip with her family. And I was told she wants some advice on being a photographer. So, you know, I become friends with a lot of these people. So even after the trip, I'm around to ask questions. So I become friends like a lot of the A&K experts. They become friends with the guests, because our goal is, all kidding aside, you know, I don't want people to say, you know, when they leave there, oh, Rick Salmon's the greatest photographer I ever met. I want people to say, Rick Salmon's the nicest, most giving guy, you know, I've ever met on a ship. And people who've taken my workshops will tell you that I feel that way, because, you know, everybody knows what I know about f-stops and ISO and lenses and all this other stuff that we've talked about. But at the end of the game, you know, that's what I want people to feel.
Rick, you are definitely the most nicest and knowledgeable man that I met on my cruise ship last year to Antarctica. So thank you again for that.
Much. Thank you. I was on my best behavior.
So the next question for you, Rick, is where have you not been that you would love to shoot someday?
You know what? A lot of people ask me that question. Greenland.
Greenland?
Yeah, I've been.
Why Greenland?
I love the blue ice. I love ice. You know, a lot of people go to Antarctica for the animals, and I went there the first time. I've been to there 5 times, and the blue ice. If I had a choice between photographing the animals or the blue ice, it might be the blue ice. So you know, you're photographing these sculptures of nature, and you're photographing the art in nature. So, but that's what's great about these A&K trips. There's such a diversity of subjects. You know, if you guys wanted, I could come back and give 11 more presentations just on Antarctica with all the great pictures I got on these trips, because it's just so much fun, and the planning. You know, the first time I went, you know, I'm on the ship with 200 people, and you know, just a few Zodiacs. I say, you know, the guests, am I going to get a lot of time on land? There's more than enough time to get shots, especially since you can shoot from the deck in your room,
Right.
eating a club sandwich.
Right.
You know, Bob,
This question.
I said,
No,
Bob,
you're right.
Bob could do like, maybe A&K should do an A&K cookbook, you know? I'll do the photography next time with the club sandwich, right? So the next question, sorry.
No, you're good. This is a question for Bob and you, Rick. When do king penguins have eggs?
So what was that?
When do kings have eggs? King penguins.
Kings have eggs. I will preface this to say that I am not the ornithologist. However, I've been around long enough to kind of learn. South Georgia, the interesting thing about South Georgia is that it is unlike Antarctica, where there is a very, very specific breeding period and season. South Georgia has a bit of a staggered sort of breeding cycles, so breeding periods, because of the geography where it's located. So pretty much during the course of the time that we go to Antarctica and South Georgia, you're by and largely going to have, even in January, you'll still have the opportunity. And I know, Rick, this was, if I'm
This is January, yeah. January 9th, I took that picture.
Yeah, you still have nesting king penguins and nesting rookeries. That's not the case in the Antarctic Peninsula, because the breeding season is much earlier, because it's a very dramatic seasonal cycle, right? So the breeding period in Antarctica starts sort of end of November going into December, and you're pretty much over the nesting and the eggs and all of that by sort of the early part to maybe mid-January. And then you've got the chicks, and you've got the activity of the families and things like that. So, but in South Georgia in particular, where you saw the photo of the nesting king, you'll likely see that at any time during the course of the season. Often someone will ask me, you know, when is the best time to go to Antarctica? And if you're a photographer, I always say the best time to go is when Rick Salmon is on board. He'll be with us in January next year. So.
Yeah, it's you know, you know, sometimes I just can't find the words, and I get choked up when it's just so beautiful. You get off that ship, and you know, I say people go to Africa. You know, you see the circle of life in Africa, where, you know, there's a lot of kills. You know, you see a lion get a baby zebra or whatever. You don't come back from Africa unchanged. And actually, Bob and I are talking about doing an A&K trip to Africa maybe next year. But anyway, I don't think you come back from Antarctica unchanged either, because just the beauty and being this close to nature and realizing that, hey, you know, I'm just a little speck on the planet, you know, especially when you're in a penguin colony like this. And then again, you meet these lifelong, you meet some friends who stick with you forever and offer advice. There was a finance guy on the trip, this last trip, and my son's getting his PhD in finance, and he offered to help my son. So my son's talking to him actually from the ship. So I think this atmosphere that A&K creates of camaraderie, and which starts before the presentations with happy hour, which is I'm going to have pretty soon. Love the happy hour.
Yes. So we actually have time for one more question. So this is a perfect one to end on. This is, when is the best time to visit Antarctica?
I think we just answered that.
I'll let you repeat it, Bob.
And I'll be serious with this. It is, if you are a photographer, make sure that you let us know when Rick's going to be on. But in general terms, that question does come up quite often. And, you know, it really depends on a lot of different variables. We operate our programs at A&K. What we consider is really the height of the austral summer season and the height of the season. And that's sort of predominantly from beginning of December all the way through end of January, early February. And part of the reason for that is that we feel that that is the time of this that provides the best opportunity for all of the aspects that we want to try to deliver in terms of our programs. Early on in the season, you have a lot of a dramatic effect with more ice, more, it's a bit more of an adventure in that regard, where some of the channels are still maybe blocked and we've got to do a little bit more expedition sort of, you know, cruising and sort of the destination is sort of coming alive out of winter. When you get into December, as I mentioned before, especially in the peninsula and Antarctica, we have a lot more activity, nest building, and you know, the eggs are being laid, and the nester, the penguins are nesting. Going into January and late January, the chicks have hatched, and there's a lot more of a bustling activity in the rookeries. We get into a little bit more of a prolific element of whale watching, and whales become a little bit more prevalent in most of the areas. So that's on the wildlife side. On the weather side, you know, I always tell people it just really it ranges, you know, throughout the season. We have a wide variety of weather that we can encounter and conditions that we encounter. So, you know, from a weather standpoint, it's not as much of an element. It really comes down to me more about sort of the opportunities that you have with wildlife encounters and experiences.
If I could add to that, you know, A&K supplies these great parkas, right? The red parkas. I'd say in the last trip, it was so warm, a lot of people didn't wear those. And I'll leave it on this. I did a video on the trip before this in Antarctica. It was at Christmas time, right around between Christmas and New Year's. Remember that trip?
Yep. Yep.
If the viewers want to do a search to see what I was wearing, do a search on YouTube, Rick Salmon in a t-shirt in Antarctica. So I was it was so warm one day, I was in a t-shirt that trip, and I was also wearing a t-shirt on this trip. It can get that warm, but the next day it could be snowing.
Yep, absolutely.
But it doesn't really get colder than 32 on this last year.
Yeah, it's rarely colder on our trips down there during December and January than it is for you, you know, you in New York or me in Chicago here. Quite often I'm down there in the middle of the austral summer, and it's, you know, 30 below here in Chicago, and it's, you know, a balmy 45 degrees down in the peninsula. So yeah, it's often very pleasant, but it changes quite often, and we give all the guidance in terms of, you know, what you need to prepare in terms of, you know, layering clothing and, you know, skin protection with sunscreen, things of that nature as well. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rick and Bob. We really appreciate you guys joining us tonight. And unfortunately, everyone, we are out of time for questions, but we really appreciate all the great submissions and appreciate you joining us tonight.
Yeah.
For more tips from Rick, visit A&K on Facebook and Twitter later tonight for a link to his most recent book, Photo Therapy, Motivation, and Wisdom, Discovering the Power of Pictures. And then for more on A&K Together, follow us on social media and join us in 2 weeks on Wednesday, June 3rd for another A&K Together live event, this time with marine biologist and climate change expert, Dr. James McClintock. So thank you again, everyone, and thank you again, Bob and Rick.
Thank you. It was so much fun, and I hope we can do it again.
Thank you.
Definitely.
We
Thanks,
really
everyone.
look forward to seeing all of you soon.
Have a great holiday weekend. Thank you.